collaboration is a foundational element, like leveraging the skills and the assets of other people, to create something bigger, better, faster than what we could do on our own.
This is Experts Unleashed, revealing how professionals and entrepreneurs transform experience into income while positively impacting the world. For years, Joel Urway has helped entrepreneurs develop and launch their expert-based businesses, growing them beyond 6 and even 7 figures a year. Now, a professional expert serves their community through paid training, education, or service. This podcast will help you design and execute your plan to become a 6 or 7 figure expert without a massive team. To get more information or apply now, visit theperfectexpert.com. Let's get started.
Hey, what's going on, experts? It's Joel Urway here. Welcome to another very special episode of Experts Unleashed, and you are in for an amazing treat today. I have a very special guest, Tom Morkes, the founder and CEO of Insurgent Publishing, host of In the Trenches, and author of The Art of Instigating. Tom is a sought-after marketing growth consultant whose A-list clientele include high-profile influencers, New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, and fast-growth companies looking to scale to 8 and 9 figures. You can get inside Tom's brain by reading his blog at tommorkes.com. Tom, welcome to the show, man.
Joel, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am super, super excited. Obviously, we chatted a little bit before we hopped on our show today. I gave my audience a quick background about who you are, but in your own words, who is Tom Morkes, and why should we be excited to learn from you today?
Sure. My background is actually in the military. So I went to West Point, spent 5 years active duty. After that, as an officer in the U.S. Army. And around 5 years in, that's when it was like one of those kind of decision points. Like, do I continue on with this or do I go do something new? Because, that's just like the kind of the natural, trajectory of things. And so I had to really think about that. Like, I really enjoyed my military service. So enjoyed is a tough word, actually. It's not the right word to describe it, but it was rewarding in its own way. And I could see going forward that way, but I've always been attracted to writing and to business. Like, these are things that just fascinate me. Like the art of writing, the art of creation, just the art of art, and then the art of entrepreneurship, even like when you think about it, like what goes into starting something. And so I had already gotten to I started to dabble in like online business related stuff, but, listen to all the podcasts, reading all the blogs, trying to like piece things together. And basically what I said was, I started a blog and I thought to myself, well, I'm going to do this and see what happens. And so I took a year off to go travel around the world with my wife. So I was like, no matter what, I was going to take a year off, and then I was going to come back and maybe go to law school, or who knows, right? I had some plans, some ideas, maybe take the LSAT, go to law school, do something like that. I figured I'd make it work. I just kind of threw caution to the wind though. We went and we took a year off to go travel. That's when I was blogging. That's when things picked up, and they picked up enough where we got back. I was expecting to be in like some amount of debt. Up to that point, I'd never really had debt in my life, but I was like, oh, I'll go into some debt for this, fine, whatever. But I came back. We weren't in debt. Like, if anything, I think we like broke even or made money from it. And I was like, oh, this is wild. Let's do one more year abroad and just see where this goes. And so when we went back abroad, spent a bunch more time in like Southeast Asia. We loved it. And then I was able to really grow this thing. And this thing, it started with blogging, it started podcasting, just sharing ideas. And then it grew into a publishing company. And then it grew into a consultancy. And now at this stage, I have kind of a number of things going, a few different businesses. They serve like different markets, different industries. And I do a lot of consulting and advisory in the space for people in all sorts of different industries. And it's just been really fun. It's been a wild journey, and I'm just super excited for like what the next 5 years are going to bring.
So when you were traveling and traveling abroad, and you said you started the blog, like how were you monetizing that at the time? Because it sounded like you left and didn't realize it was actually making money until you came home. So like, how were you monetizing it?
Yeah, well, I was paying attention to the numbers because I was very aware, like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to hang this up. So I want to give it its due course. I want to put in the time, the money, and the energy, whatever it takes to get it off the ground. I wasn't really putting in much money. Everything's bootstrapped. But I was like, that's what I can commit right now is my time over the course of this next year as I travel to make something work, to see if it will work, to see if it will work in a way that I enjoy doing it. And so it was interesting because it was just kind of feeling things out and just trying different things. I started by just creating a lot of free stuff, obviously. And before I got out of the military, it's not like I'd replaced my day job income. It took me like two and a half years to get there, to get back to where I was from a captain in the Army. You got to think about that. Like that could be brutal, but it wasn't as slow as it could have been. And it could have been worse. I could have never gotten there, and I could have never broken that threshold either. So like all those things it was very fortunate. So I learned the school of hard knocks way. So start with blogging and podcast, just content creation, audience building kind of thing. And then I just started with some pay what you want products. I was like, hey, here's a book I wrote. You can tip me $5 if you want. And it was like the first time I did that, I made $500 like in the first month. Now it didn't continue that way,
right.
But that was the big thing, man, for me, where it was like, okay, $500, pay what you want. A few things just clicked in my head. It was like from a book that I had written, people were paying me money online, like for this online digital thing that just kind of like came out of thin air. Like in a lot of ways, it's like digital alchemy. And wow, there's something here. There's like a bunch of things here, nested within that one like little success there. But that was actually right before I got out. And I was like, okay, I did it here a little bit. Maybe I could do it in a bigger way. So it was publishing my own books, using pay what you want pricing. And that actually picked up a lot of steam with some virality behind it because nobody had actually written about that subject before. So picked up by Medium. It's like an article I read on that got just tens of thousands of hits, and it really spread. I did tons and tons of interviews. So it ended up being like good, but it didn't bring in a lot of money at first. So then I wrote a book on pay what you want pricing. That helped a little bit more, but it was like just a little bit more. And so it was like each time was a little bit more like secure, a little bit more success, but it was always like really precarious. I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. So I do things like, I'll pick up like a writing gig for somebody who I know. And I was like, I'll write your sales pages. I'll get the email sequences and stuff like that. So do a little bit of that. I collaborated a lot. And so I team up with people. So I teamed up with John Lee Dumas. I know you're familiar with him, and Antonio Centeno. They're both military guys. We teamed up on this collaborative project called High Speed Elite. And so we helped veterans who were transitioning out of the military as they were transitioning, or if they'd already, any veterans. We had a couple active duty, we had a couple of people who were like retired, ran the gamut, but it was just veterans. And it was helping them start online businesses. And at the time I was just getting started. I was just the grunt work, but they were the guys that knew it. Like John at that point already had was already getting tens of thousands, I think, of listens on his podcast at the time, super early, like pretty huge numbers. Antonio had like 1 million subscribers on YouTube. These guys knew digital marketing, and it was kind of just cool things. So I did that as well. So I was like doing all these kind of like, you could almost say odd jobs, but they all kind of like helped build my formation around what it takes to actually get like a business off the ground and sell digital products, sell software, create membership sites, put it all the pieces of the puzzle together. Because since then I've run launches and campaigns for software companies, for personal brands, for books. Some have hit the New York Times, Wall Street Journals. I've done record-setting crowdfunding campaigns. And it's all these little elements were actually so critical to me actually learning what this space is all about, like deeply and deeply understanding it, not just like some little aspect. So I did it the really hard way, grunt work. I was just so curious about it. I still am. Like I'm still always learning something new each and every day. But that gives you some context. It was never like, this is my one thing and I'm going to make money from it as I was going. And it wasn't like the numbers increased every month. It was like good month, bad month, good month, bad month, whatever, and it was just, but grinding it out. But then over time, the trend line is up. And that's what I noticed at the end of the year, because I wasn't expecting that. I just kind of kept my head down, did the work, didn't worry about the revenue necessarily, as in I wasn't judging myself based on what was coming in. I was like, I'm going to put this out there as best I can. We'll see what comes of it. And that's it. Because I was like, if I'm not cut out for this, then that's it. Like, I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to get all angry at the world. If I'm a bad writer and people don't want to read my books, I'm going to move on. I'm only going to struggle at that for so long. But like the trajectory has been up.
So you have a book called Collaborate, and you mentioned that you did some collaboration with John Lee Dumas and some other people. Tell me a little bit about what your angle is with collaboration and joint ventures, or maybe it's different. Maybe joint ventures and collaboration is different. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of kind of terms in here, I think, that are people use interchangeably. And that's actually kind of frustrated me in the past, just trying to learn it myself and realizing there's like nuance between these things. So I'll just like say, broadly speaking, collaboration is working with other people, with other businesses, and so sometimes people call those like, in some capacity, sometimes that would mean a joint venture partnership. And that's in this space, colloquially, it's okay, two of us are going to promote this one thing, my one thing, and you'll get a split of the cash or something like that, or your one thing and I'll get a split, or something that we do together. That's another more common way to think about it. It's actually, a product together as joint venture partners. Then we have affiliates, which is just a misnomer, if you know the way people use it, because that's just a way that affiliate just means the way you pay something. It's based on performance of some kind, whatever that performance metric is. So the point is, there's a lot of pieces here. But what I found is that collaboration is a foundational element, like leveraging the skills and the assets of other people, to create something bigger, better, faster than what we could do on our own, fundamentally. And there's multitude of ways to do it. So, and when I wrote the book Collaborate, it was in the context, at least of the framework of kind of fundamentally, I think what I did with John, Antonio, and myself with High Speed Elite. And I did that with a few other kind of collaborations like that, where we come in, so we're going to build this together. We're going to do this thing together. And basically, here's how it'll work. We'll divvy these things up, like in terms of like what people do, scope of work, those kind of things. And we'll split a piece of the proceeds, or we'll each get like equity stake and split revenue kind of thing. And that was like, I found that I share that idea in the book Collaborate, because I'm like, there's just so many people, at least who tell me like they're looking to get started, they're trying to get started, but they're trying to do everything themselves and they're really struggling. And I'm like, man, I'm so glad that the same time I started my blog, I'm glad I started that, but that I was doing these things with other people who were more established than me, so that I didn't waste my time. It was like, for me, that was like a propellant, or a rocket fuel to advance, because I got to see behind the scenes of what it takes to be successful in the space. Number one. Number two, because I was doing the grunt work and I traded my time, because I couldn't trade the money, right? I traded my time. Then I was able to get involved in pieces of this, like things that I wouldn't have otherwise maybe, but it was helpful in the building of it, the foundation. But the other big things are, they come with a platform already. They come, so they have audience. They have an audience already, established audiences, established reach, established readerships and listeners and viewers. And not only do they understand the back end of these things, but all these other valuable things that come from like partnering up with other people. And so if you're somebody who doesn't have that, you can trade time or money. So you can pay a lot of money and have it built and developed, and that's great, or you could invest your time, and you can invest your time in I think a collaborative type setting here. Your results will just go so much faster, so much better. It's just, and this again, this is in the context of starting something new from scratch with other people who had complementary skill sets. But this can just as easily, you can take the same thing that I'm saying and say, well, use it in a joint venture partnership style. And how can you guys amplify each other's businesses if you're both established? Or if somebody else is established and you're not so much, maybe there's a function there. And so not to go down that rabbit hole, but to say like, yeah, there's a couple ways but I feel like everybody benefits from looking at things of where can they leverage other people? Where can they leverage other talent and influencers and experts and businesses in a way that's collaborative? And that means it's mutually beneficial, like that everybody wins. So I'm always on the lookout for those kind of deals, those kind of structures, those kind of things.
Yeah. I think it can get pretty daunting for somebody who hasn't done it before. And like, how do you approach, how do you even start the planning stages of collaboration? Because it makes sense, right? Partnering up or collaborating with somebody who you have a complementary skill set to, theoretically and conceptually, it makes sense. And when it hits, it can hit big and it can hit fast. It can take you to 0 to, sky high very, very quickly if it's done correctly. What are some of the nuances with kind of seeking out these collaborative efforts, and how would somebody approach that situation?
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's like not every collaboration or every way that I've collaborated with people has ended up financially successful for everybody. In some cases, we've done things where they've been duds or they just didn't pan out for a multitude of reasons, because there are a multitude of reasons. There are many elements that go into this. And I would say, here's the short answer to the question is, I don't know if there's any way you can know. You can't, just like you don't know like where the future will bring you with what you're doing right now. Like, is this blogging and writing and podcasting worth it? Is this going to get you somewhere? Are these calls going to be useful? This call I'm going to get on with so-and-so, or this call I'm going to get on with so-and-so, or, whatever you're trying to sell or produce or create, do you know that it will work in a year or two? No, like all our judgment is like so skewed and so wrong. So often, it's wild that I think we have any predictive power, but there's something beautiful about, I guess, like faith and hope in that way, right? But we have this idea of the future. We have some faith and hope in it, and we move that direction. When it comes to partnerships or collaboration, working with other people, at the end of the day, it's just the same gut instinct and some amount of evaluation, like being really earnest and telling the truth about yourself and what you could do, especially if we're talking, because I'm talking, there's a couple people in mind who I'm talking to, which makes it a little tough. The person who's just beginning, you have to be able to evaluate yourself and take stock. What can you actually provide? And if you can't come in and be able to provide something, like I said, time, because you have a skill set or can build one really quickly. Money, you're just going to invest in it, or the assets that somebody else might bring to the table. Like if you're not bringing anything to the table, it might not work for you. My suggestion in the book and what I was talking about, especially for those who are just getting started, is like, listen, if you have no discernible skill set like me, a great place to start is like as a project manager. Everybody needs somebody to push a project along. Every business owner I know is every single one that I talk to, and I have like a mastermind. I have a couple of groups, and we're always talking about this kind of stuff, and it's like inevitably somebody's always on the lookout to hire or get somebody to help with the management of projects, project management, somebody who's like can organize things and move it forward.
Right.
It's like if you could do that, which I believe I don't know. I like to believe that anybody could do that. Right? I really do. Like I really don't think it's that complicated, but it's hard work. But so the point is that's a really quick way to advance. Will you know what the right collaboration is? I have no idea. The way is I try to discern that though and make choices. I always look at it that way. I count the cost of this thing that we're doing. I look at the cost benefit. It's like doing a real cost benefit analysis of this. So if I'm business to business, where I do a lot of these kind of partnerships now and these kind of things, these kind of collaborations, I'm like, what do I have? What do I bring to the table? What does this person bring to the table? In what way can they be a benefit to me? Because otherwise, what's the point of having a conversation? Except I'm just going to be nice. But if I can articulate, this person could help me this way, reach or influence or I don't know, whatever, or sales, whatever. Maybe there's 100 different ways. Exposing me to a new audience of people, helping us, launch, whatever. Okay, articulate that. Then I think, how can I help them? Because a lot of people, especially in this like the blogging, podcasting space and world that we're kind of in, at least we each have like maybe a foot or a part of a foot in there, right?
Right.
We're all very, very collaborative by nature. Like that's been my experience, right? You have an interview like this, and people are really open to helping and each other out. And I find that is interesting. So that's a great thing to be doing. But I think that's the case in a lot of spaces. So if you reach out, you connect with people, you'll find that they're actually really open to being supportive of you. And it doesn't always have to be like a monetary transaction, like pay to play or something like that. That's another reason I like collaboration. A lot of times is you could do it leaner and faster than going through that. And so a lot of these times I'm just having that conversation. Once I know how this person can help me, or this business can help me, and how I can help them, then I can reach out to them and say, hey, here's what I was thinking. Get on a call and talk through it. I mean, and it's like, that's the science behind that, like truly. And if you could articulate it, people are either in or out. And that's the thing you learn pretty quick. It's like, these things don't have to be audacious or huge. That's like the context of like a small business partnership. If you're going like starting something from scratch, that would take a little bit more time, a few more calls to develop. But fundamentally, it'd be the same thing. Here's the idea. Here's how it could work. Let's put this stuff together. And I would just say briefly on this, and then we can kind of go wherever you want. Like anytime I do take on a new project, the first piece is road mapping. We roadmap and we outline what the launch is going to look like, what the campaign is going to look like. So, and even the businesses that I've done, the ventures I've been a part of, and definitely for launches, like that's where it starts. It's timeline, scopes of work, critical path. Those are like, and I do write about that and collaborate actually.
Yeah.
So there you go. Another plug for the book.
One of the things that is always fascinated, and I think so I'll speak from experience here on the art of collaboration. So I did a big collaborative project middle of last year with one of my clients. Came to my event, liked what they did. I taught them some marketing, and I said, okay, I really like these people, and I have an idea for us to collaborate together and really do some damage. And went well for about 3 or 4 months, and then the danger that we ran into was like we both had multiple interests, and we were very profitable. We made some good money, so like the project itself was a success, but we ended up killing it at one point just because like you could see I had other interests, they had other interests, and like that joint venture interest, that collaborative interest that we did, it wasn't as high a priority as when we first started. So how often does that typically happen? And how do you approach that? Yeah.
So again, my approach on this is also not from the context of like how to start a partnership necessarily, or how to establish partnerships, because I think there are plenty of books and people who speak to that thing, and I don't see myself as any kind of like expert, even knowledgeable in that space, honestly. But on the topic of collaboration, where there's some overlap, obviously there's some overlap for sure, but I look for compatibility compatibility across the board. What I mean is like, and things that are compatible and complementary. And so I use that as kind of like a framework of how I view everything. So it's like, how am I complementary of this other person? And like, how can I help them? How can they help me? Right? Pretty obvious. But at the same time, like if we do a project together, how can it help both of us in spite of the fact that we're doing our own things? Right. And so it's like, okay, so this could be something that, yeah, if it takes a little bit more, so if we do a joint venture, but it's not our main thing together, like not like a partnership, one business skyrocketing, you're always going to have that. You're going to have that splintering off because you're not all focused on one thing. But I say to myself, this is at least how I approach it. How do we do so in such a way where we kind of like set expectations and standards? We can reevaluate them in the future if we want. What do we expect it to be? And, as it goes, is that what's happening? And then just being very clear too, before you get started, it's like, okay, in a worst case scenario where this does not take off, what are the benefits? Is there any benefit to this at all if it does not take off? And I think, and it's not that you have to like be able to win if it doesn't take off, but it shouldn't be a huge loss. It shouldn't be a big loser, right? That then I feel like defeats the purpose. So it's really kind of, it's a little bit of, and I don't know, maybe Nassim Taleb would critique me on this. I almost feel like it's a very anti-fragile strategy to it. And it's like this idea of like, because you want to limit your downside and expose yourself to massive upside. And so with these kind of partnerships, because if you can scope it out, especially if you start on like small things kind of working together and just let's see how they go, we go from there. But that means road mapping. It means planning it out, having a timeline, understand the scope of work, understand the critical path, what people are bringing to the table. But you could do that. You could have something up and running in 3 to 6 months. Maybe it's a little bit of an investment, but you could very quickly see if it was worth the time, money, or effort. But also once you've done that, you kind of scoped everything out. You have an idea of like what the plan of action is and all that. You could say to yourself, if I'm putting in that amount of time or money or energy and it doesn't hit these goals that we have for ourselves, like what does failure look like? You have to define failure. A lot of people are just scared to just write down what failure looks like. I don't know why. Well, I know why, but anyway, you should do it. So like articulate what that is, but also then count the costs of what failure looks like for you personally too. Not just, we didn't hit our numbers, but what does that genuinely mean? Because if it means that you're not going to pay the next month's mortgage, I think that's the wrong path. You're going to lose your house. Probably not the right collaboration. A little bit too much on the line. If worst case scenario is you sacrifice like, I don't know, like 40 hours in total over the course of 6 months, but you didn't really sacrifice any money because you weren't investing in that capacity or da. And worst case scenario, you don't get it off the ground like you want, but now you're tighter with your partners in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's helped each of your brands in some way. Because I think that was a thing when I look at, High Speed Elite, that doesn't exist anymore. And it's because of that same situation. John's stuff is just huge. And so is Antonio's. Like now they're talking millions and millions of people who watch and listen to them. It's insane. And my stuff's taken off in its own direction, a totally different direction as well. And so none of us had and that was one of the things. I think if I had been able to continue to move it forward, those guys could have still collaborated, just less time investment, maybe more money kind of investment to get it off the ground if I wanted to. But I think I was kind of the linchpin to move that forward because their things were more established than mine at the time. So those things kind of naturally, sometimes these things just naturally outgrow themselves. So I guess that's another point of it, is understanding that these things don't have to be in forever. And that's why you shouldn't be scared of it. You shouldn't be scared of it. You should like approach it from like a project basis. Yep. And do it that way, it minimizes downside and you can still maximize upside. And you guys can still be flexible and adaptable to whatever comes, whatever manifests. I've also done other, collaborative stuff that has like really taken off, in different ways. And you just never know. But I'm always open to like make those adjustments.
Yep. And I think it's important to be clear and set the expectation up front. Like, like you said before, what does failure look like? And, what does success look like? I think with whoever you're collaborating with, setting that up on, the very forefront. So it's clear and say, okay, cool. And maybe even have a timeline, it's like, okay, this is how long we're going to work on it. And then we're going to reevaluate. This is what success looks like. And then we're going to reevaluate. This is what failure looks like. And then whatever, if this hits, then we move on. It sounds like a fantastic mental model. I've been doing a lot of Evan Pagan research lately and following his mental model stuff. But I saw some parallels there with kind of like do you follow Evan?
I followed him back, I think when it was David D'Angelo. So like back then, but no, I was paying attention. I was like, this guy's a genius when it comes to marketing. And I was like, this is so brilliant. Like, I wonder how hard it is to build something in the dating space. That's actually where my mind was at, like, I don't know, like 10 years ago when he was doing it. So I kind of paid attention in its early stages from a marketing standpoint. I thought what he was doing with email marketing was just brilliant, but I've since kind of paid attention to what he's doing now when he teaches it more. But I think I get an idea of his mental models. I think he actually talked about that in his dating, when he's in the dating space.
Yeah. Very, very smart guy. Very smart guy. I haven't followed him too closely until recently, but yeah, very intelligent stuff. So what are you doing now? You talk about, we haven't mentioned it on the podcast, we talked about it before the show. You're doing things now like influencer marketing. Like, has collaboration led to influencer marketing? I mean, so where has that journey kind of taken you?
So I still feel like it's all under the umbrella of collaboration, and it's manifested in a few different forms. And a natural outgrowth has been, when I was doing a lot of the stuff with podcasting, right? You're connecting with a lot of people. You just are by nature, you're connecting with a lot of people. If you're blogging consistently, this is when I was in the early days. I don't really blog much anymore. I'm just so busy. But I used to write about the people I was fascinated by, or who I thought were interesting and were doing good stuff. And so then that was another way to kind of form that relationship to some degree. But it also forced me to pay attention to who was out there. Sometimes it allowed me to connect with people, obviously podcasting especially, but then also it's just what that would lead to. Podcasts. Oh, what are you working on? I'm working on this. What are you working on? I'm working on this. Maybe I can intro you to these people. Oh, maybe I can help you out this way. So the whole thing has been a very just collaborative exercise as far as I'm concerned. I'm never afraid to ask for introductions or see if somebody might suggest I meet somebody or something like that, and then taking them up on that. So yeah, all of that was kind of foundational component to just collaboration in general, is saying there's people worth meeting, people worth connecting with. And I don't know who's going to be worth connecting with or not, whether it's a big name or not. It's not the point. It's actually, you're not judging it on the outside. It's but it's just worthwhile to have that conversation. It's worthwhile to connect with that person. So that kind of naturally led to when we were doing these launches for these books, the ones that I was publishing, and then with clients that I worked with some traditionally published authors and also self-publishers who had who had a publisher already, so they didn't want to be published through Insurgent Publishing, but they just wanted me to help with the marketing and the campaign and the launch. So we had USA Today, New York Times, lots of Amazon bestsellers and stuff like that. But what goes into that? Well, what goes into that is you need people to see your book, right? We want readers. We want people who buy the book, and we want readers, but they're often one and the same unless we're doing big bulk book orders, but we'll ignore that for a second. So how do you get a book in the hands of more readers? I mean, there's only so many ways. If you're really trying to hit a mainstream, if you want to hit a New York Times or Wall Street Journal, USA Today, you have to have a certain amount of distribution, and you have to in the hands of individual readers. And it doesn't mean that you have to be traditionally published either, by the way. But what I'm getting at is you need to be able to get that book in front of enough people. How do you do it? How do the guys that are self-publishing and successful with it do it? If you peel back the layers, you realize they're able to kind of create these viral, for lack of a better way to describe it, viral launches. Assuming this is all done ethically, they're not just paying somebody to go buy all their books. But if they're actually getting the organic reach of sales, which is everything we've done and worked on, then what's happening is there is a viral component to that. And what it means is that networks of people are sharing and spreading the book. And then that's within networks, and then across networks. That's happening as well. And so it's things like, well, how would you tap into a network of readers? Well, bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers, people are paying attention to them. It's so it's right there in your face, it's let's connect with those people. Let's find a win-win. So we did that for books. And in this case, this is why I say collaboration is kind of the umbrella. In almost no cases did we ever pay anyone to share the books that we had them share. They did it out of their own volition because it was a good fit. They saw the value in this book and how it could help their audience. Somehow there was a relationship between me and them, even just subtly or enough, or there was a good reference or something, enough to actually have that conversation. And then to get this in the hands of dozens and sometimes hundreds of, broadly speaking, influencers. That's how I would define them. And getting them to share a book. Okay, we did that with books. They never got compensated. I've done it with other products, digital products, e-courses, e-books, membership sites, coaching, software. So I've done all of it. I've done all sorts of models of pay, no pay, whatever. And so what's so interesting is that's where where it's important, I think, when people make the mistake of labeling something that it's not, like the affiliate type stuff, that's a mode of payment. But you don't actually have to have an affiliate program or even have to pay affiliates if you're trying to collaborate people and get them to share what you're doing. It doesn't even need to be, but everybody goes straight to that. It's I get affiliates because I pay them a percentage of the sales they make. It's okay, I'm going to have 1 million people promoting this because they can make money when they sell it. It doesn't work that way. Just FYI for anybody who thinks that. But instead, what actually matters is the relationship component. And I think this is where I found this is what I've been able to do. And so it's my experience, but it's hard to challenge it, but it's that personal touch and the personal connection. Like, I'm paying attention to what you're doing. I know who you are. I've, and I've done something proactive to kind of establish that relationship. Like, leave a comment on a blog, like reply to a newsletter in an email, like write a podcast review. How hard is that? It's not hard, but so few people do it. It's really nice though when somebody does, right? That's all. And those are things like little subtle things, little gestures that aren't hard to do, but mean a lot to the other person to a degree, like depending on kind of what level they're at. I get that. But, it's just little things, because it's just like little ways that you could be a benefit. So it's not even big stuff, but like, that kind of stuff done across time, with a bunch of different people that you want to connect with or in your space, just like trying to be helpful to them. When the time comes and you need to roll these kind of things out, man, we've tapped into, millions, literally millions of email subscribers, like millions. And
Mm-hmm.
I know people have probably done bigger campaigns, no doubt about that. But this is with like, no money out of pocket to pay them to do it, is what I'm getting at. And that's like one of the most authentic ways to share something, because these are influencers. They have audiences, and they're giving a referral. So it's a referral on steroids, effectively. That's what this kind of influencer marketing is all about, in my opinion. So it works with books on all sorts of different, tons, everything else, like everything I just mentioned, we've done it for. So it can work in it's in almost any niche or industry. Have done it in health, business, marketing, publishing, real estate. Like, there's a lot of ways this can work.
Yeah. And so I'll talk about my experience with it briefly, because I just did it. So with my audience, we just did a recent promotion for somebody who I respect in the copywriting space, promoted his course to my audience. And I don't ever do affiliate promotions, like, ever. And so obviously I was compensated for it. But it was that type of agreement. But I will say this, as I was running that promotion, I got feedback from my audience who they were thanking me for sharing something that was relevant for them. And I think on the outside looking in, from somebody who's trying to approach a collaborative effort, influencer marketer, like, and you think that like it'd be really difficult to approach them, the value add is if you have something that is super valuable and you get an influencer to share it with their audience, like, you have to look at it as, it's so good that they're going to thank the influencer for sharing it with them. And it does happen. And I think the first few times that I was approached by it and considering those, like, I didn't see that, right? I always saw it as a one-way transaction with the affiliate and with a product promoter. But if it's a good share, like, influencers want to share it because, number one, it's content, and they all need content to give their audience. And number two, if it provides value, like, they're going to thank them for it. And it's going to be a win-win in that sense. And so that was a big shift for me to really understand that there are big wins. Like, there are those relationships that you can foster, especially with people with big lists, or not even big lists, but just with audiences. Like, they need content to share. They need good content to share. And when it is good, it will actually strengthen that bond with their audience, because now it's different types of content. So that's been a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, I think it's also now it'll probably change. Like, I bet your approach to it now moving forward will be a lot different now that you've seen that and realized that, right? And that you've had that experience. I think a lot of the animosity from this kind of stuff, or if there is any, or negative feelings towards even like affiliate marketing, it's like because somebody somewhere had a bad experience or something like that. And it's like, you shouldn't base it off that. I agree. I do this. I don't do very, very often. I don't do like those kind of like affiliate type offers either. But like, what I do try to look for is times when it is complimentary, ideally speaking. And to just be like, that's the thing. It's like, if you're in those kind of conversations with people, it's like, make sure that it is a good fit for you. I wouldn't. So this actually, some people get down a rabbit hole here. And I think it could be maybe dangerous, is like the relationship, or not even relationship, like we'll say the business partnership in a capacity like this is really reciprocal. And so I think actually see people do this, and I think they destroy their platforms, because they're just like basically doing these trades, and it doesn't matter what they're putting in front of their readership. Mm-hmm. And so that stuff, if you don't pay attention to that, it's like, why would somebody stay on your newsletter? It's the wildest thing though to me when I'll send an email. I don't, as inconsistently as I do, when I send an email and then I'll get it and reply back from somebody, and they've been on my list for 5 years or something like that. It's the most wild thing. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm on anybody's list from 5 years ago.
I know.
So, but that's good. So I was like, that's a little indicator that maybe I'm doing something right. I try to pay attention to those things. But at the same time, not hold me back too. But I've gone through a lot of transitions, like of things that I've been teaching or selling, which has been really interesting. And that's the most wild thing. Like when I started, it's very different than where I am now. And what I've been teaching has changed. And I mean, it's always been, there's some elements that have like, there's a consistency to it, I guess. But it's like, then to think that people are still on an email list that many years later is always wild. But the point is, those people be on an email list a long time, they'll find this offer particularly useful. They'll find this training particularly useful. But again, that's why you have to start with the vantage point of like, how is this beneficial for, say, my readers? If that's what you're trying to build a readership or an audience, like how does this benefit them first? Because then, it's like there's 100 things that could benefit them. Those are the things then you want to become an affiliate of and make some money on the back end because you're helping anyway. So it's just like some discernment it takes for sure.
Mm-hmm. What would be the best recommendation for approaching that conversation? Like approaching somebody about a potential collaboration. Like how would you approach it? Do you always approach, or I don't want to say always, would you recommend approaching it through a mutual connection, or assuming nobody has mutual connections, how would you go about approaching it cold?
So number one is I wouldn't approach it cold.
Okay.
That would be my rule number one, not at all. So what I do is I teach this in a course that I created called Influencer Marketing Method. And in Influencer Marketing Method, I kind of break this down. And it's basically this approach because so many people run into this. It's like, hey, your partnerships and influencers would be really beneficial for your business. They're out there too. Probably hundreds in any given niche. Like unless you get really, really like niche, or something like that, you get really narrow. But like yoga, I'm doing something in the keto space right now. I've done stuff in real estate. I mean, any one of those, you could carve that up and see like you can get more and more narrow, but in any one of these spaces, hundreds, sometimes thousands of like people who have followers that watch them, follow them, read them, subscribe. Okay, so they're out there. So when I approach something like that, I'm like, listen, if these are the people I want to partner up with, I can be a little proactive. I could do a little bit of research, put a little time and effort into this, right? Because that's money. It effectively is money if you do get it off the ground. And that's another thing. I remind people, it's like, you should know that there's a value associated with like every person It's not that like it's a different value. That's not the thing that I mean, but which is to say that it's like every person to your bottom line of your business, I think you should treat like they would be a windfall for you. And I think if you approach it that way, like as in you will get on a call with them. And I'll get on calls with people who I know they're like, I have 100 people on my email list. I'm like, it's okay. That's fine. I'd rather have more people sharing this kind of stuff than not. I need, that's okay. But listen, and then I have another person that's like, I got 100,000. It's like, great. I'm going to treat both of you with the same amount of respect and get things done the same way. And it's okay because that person is small right now, might not be in the future. Number one, you got to take kind of a longer term approach to this. A lot of people want to come at this really fast. That's the problem. That's actually why we're having this comment. Okay, well, how would you reach out to somebody cold? It's like, because everybody wants to move fast. Yep. And they move fast at their own peril in this capacity. And so I don't do cold outreach. I warm up the relationship. I only do warm outreach. As in like, so I'm following these people on Twitter. I'm reading their newsletters, signing for their newsletters. I'm listening to their podcasts. Okay. Because you don't need 1 million. You need 10 really good partners is what you need. You could do that for 10 people. You could do that for 10 people a month, honestly. If you broke it up and you spent about 30 minutes a day and you had a system to follow, you could do that. And all of a sudden you have 10 partners that you're kind of starting to establish a relationship this month, 20 by next month. By the end of the year, you have over 100. That's, any one person can probably manage at least, like we'll say that might be a lot actually. 40 is probably all you need. I mean, all the campaigns we've done, and we go for the 80-20 principle here. I don't need a lot. I'd rather have better fits. And so we'll work with, campaigns like 30 partners, 40 partners, 50 partners, and we'll do, lots and lots and lots of sales, like an absurd amount of sales. Okay. And so it doesn't require a lot, but it does require time and some sort of investment in that person, irregardless if it pans out into anything. That's a gamble. A lot of people aren't. They're like, no, I'll put another $1,000 in Facebook ads. It's like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not for everybody. I don't think everybody has the capacity for something like this, where they don't have the bandwidth for it necessarily, like, or something like that. Like they've prioritized other areas of what they're doing, which is fine. But to me, I found that this is a huge lever that so many people are missing right now. And it's such a simple one actually to like pull. It's simple, but because it requires a little bit of effort and foresight, a lot of people just ignore it. But I see that's why it's a huge opportunity right now for people who are just like a little bit like paying a little bit of attention to who's out there and they start doing this. The other thing is now when I do reach out to people, and I've been doing this recently, it's an email. Hey Joel, what are you working on right now? What's your focus? Awesome. I'm working on a couple things that I thought would be a really good fit for your audience. I thought they'd be win-win. I want to see how we could collaborate or support each other. What's the best way to get 15 minutes on your calendar? Or are you available for a short call in the next week or two? I can put a calendar link. And so far, 6 out of 6 calls I've had in like the last week, we've arranged promotions.
Yep.
And this is what's wild is this is me teaching and I'm going to be doing a webinar and selling in this capacity, but I do this for other things too. Lots of different ways. And each one of those cases, there was no like, I don't even know if the conversation of what the price, like what the percentage was as a commission was even brought up on the calls. So we were just talking about, hey, here's what I could teach your audience if you're interested. This is why I thought it would be a good fit. What are you working on? Okay, great. I'd love to, maybe we can kind of support you in a variety of ways. But like, it's great. It's like, it's so easy. It's wild. But again, I had those relationships. I established those relationships over time. So this wasn't really a hard conversation to have. I think if I was starting brand new, that wouldn't be the first thing I would lead with if they don't know you. But they can get to know you over the course of 3 to 6 weeks. If you were commenting on their blogs, replying to their newsletters, doing some of these other little small things to warm it up before you ever reach out to them to show that you're there in earnest. Yep.
No, it's brilliant. I really want to highlight the point that short-term versus long-term approach. And I think when you're first starting out, this is very, very difficult. You're trying to get revenue coming into your business. Like, of course, you want short-term, but understand that you are looking at massive, massive influential power when you nurture and develop these relationships and approach it the right way. Because eventually you're going to hit somebody that's got a 10,000 person list, 50,000 person list, 100,000 person list, or they've got a YouTube channel that gets, 50,000 views a month or whatever that is, whatever that platform is, and it gets you massive, massive exposure. It is so important to develop and nurture those relationships because they can be huge. I mean, Chet Holmes calls it the Dream 100. I think it's probably very, very similar, but you're finding those dream partners that can skyrocket you, that can really just, explode your business. Very, very fantastic stuff. So Tom, like we talked about a ton of stuff today. Like this idea of collaboration is very fascinating to me because when you look at the best-selling authors, New York Times, Wall Street Journals, those are a lot of your clients, right? They get on those lists because they are able to, and I have people who come onto my podcast. We had Ryan Levesque on yesterday. He's promoting a new book, right? But they do this through virality when they're promoting their books, when they're promoting their stuff. Like they look for platforms and virality and collaboration. There's so much power to this. And my wheels are just churning, thinking about the different ways because I haven't leveraged it the best that I can because mostly my business is through, warm traffic referrals and we do some paid traffic as well. But I haven't really taken a dedicated approach to collaboration as much as I should have. So it's been on my radar, but it's just, this is a perfect timing for it. And so is there anything that we kind of missed on this topic that you really want to make sure that my audience, my listeners kind of said, okay, we really missed one core thing with this whole topic?
I actually think surprisingly in a not even necessarily a roundabout way, it actually happened kind of, I think, pretty well in this conversation. I'm kind of surprised, but in it unintentionally, it was structured very well. I think we hit all the baseline kind of fundamentals. We've already talked about play the long game. Take a relationships-based approach to this. Don't send cold email. Like the don'ts are probably, if you just stick by the don'ts and you do some of this other basic stuff, like the rest, the details will follow. You'll figure them out. The big don'ts, don't cold email someone. Don't approach this transactionally. You don't want to burn bridges. Like those are the kind of things that burn bridges, in my opinion. Treat the partners like you'd want to be treated. No, that's a good principle for life.
Treat all partners equally, regardless of their size, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's another thing. Like sometimes, so in the past, like when I've worked with clients, like okay, I want to get big partners on board. It's like awesome. Okay, great. Well, I focus on fit. We're going to do fit, and so if I know somebody has a big audience, like for sure, I'll do what I can. Like, but at the same time, I'm not going to discount somebody who doesn't necessarily have that is not an Oprah. I get it. Like or people just getting started. What people miss out on when they do that, and this is the conversation I would have to have with the client to, set them straight and how they're thinking about this. But it's like this. You don't know, where that person's going to go and how it's going to grow. But even if let's take a short-term pragmatic approach to this or thought process. It's still better to have somebody who doesn't have much reach championing your product or service. And so I'd rather get as many people as possible championing what I'm doing than not. And at the end of the day, and then from that, it's I'd love word of mouth referral. That's great too. But the part we could definitely engineer is the influencer referrals. And so I'd rather have again, and that's the thing. It's I do believe in the 80-20 principle. And I think that's for sure true. You have 100 partners. I mean, honestly, it's only going to be 10 of them will generate 90% of the revenue. It's more of a 90-10 distribution there. That's fine. That's okay. The other 90 strategically, again, even if you don't want to look at this like, okay, it's like, why even waste my time on that? Well, here's why. It's worth your time, not only for the potential future growth, but it's like you're almost blocking out the competition. Because if these people, except for maybe rare few exceptions, but a lot of people I'm talking about, they're people who have followers, they have brands, and they're trying to grow those things, and they want to continue to grow their brand and their business. So they take it seriously. So they're not going to be promoting to they won't necessarily, some people who are really bad at it do this, and I don't think they last very long, but they won't promote two of the exact same thing. Usually they'll choose one brand to be, say, an ambassador of or a sponsor of or something like that, or share or promote. So the point is, the more ambassadors you have, that means that other people cannot have those ambassadors. I mean, look at it. It's like a ground war in the yoga space. I think it's kind of hilarious. But the point is, you do that. It's like there's strategic benefit to that. There's strategic benefit to being the one that somebody's already promoting, because that means they're also not going to promote somebody else. That's if you get into if you want to look at it really, I guess, pragmatically, and like, what's my short-term gain right now for this if I do this? Well, you could at least think of it that way. There's strategic benefit there. But I don't think it's a bad approach. I think that would diminish probably the conversations you're having if you're using it strictly for that, but that's what I'm saying. It's a secondary or tertiary consequence, and it's really good. It's really useful. Like when you're going for a New York Times bestseller launch, right? And you have 100 people sharing, I'll tell you what, that's 100 people sharing. Yes. But it's also 100 people not sharing somebody else's book that same weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
And all it takes is one person to really make that connection, make that relationship. It happened to me actually. I shouldn't say it was influencer, but it kind of falls on the same umbrella of like referral-based marketing and word of mouth, right? I would say it is word of mouth, but because people listen to my podcast, I was talking to a prospect yesterday, big influencer, has a massive audience, and he's a lead for me. And he goes, yeah, the reason why I found you is not because of your podcast or anything like that, but somebody who listened to your podcast said, hey, I see what you're working on. You need to do a webinar. The person you need to speak to is Joel. And so that's how it generated. And I had no idea who this person was. I asked what her name was, and I didn't, nobody that I had met personally. But it's all about that. People are willing to share as long as the value is good, as long as the content is good, and never discounting the value of that is very, very key.
No, 100%. Yeah, you'll be surprised. I know I'm still to this day surprised. Even I take the approach and the view. I'm like, to purposely not be judgmental before I go into things, and I try not to be. But even then, I'll work with somebody, and so I'm just just doing the thing I would do for anybody, but getting them set up to promote. Get them their swipe copy or the graphics, get them, whatever, right? And then we go to the launch and we see the numbers coming in. I'm like, wow, this person's crushing it. So yeah, you never know. You literally never. I mean, then what I do, I have a Rolodex, right? And then I have a list, and I keep track of this stuff. And then I'm like, okay, these are the real powerhouses of affiliates. And I pay attention to what, so then there's the value of that. So now I've done 100 campaigns or something like that, managed thousands of affiliates. So I have a pretty good grasp of who the producers are in any given industry in a lot of ways, which is pretty useful for me, But the point is, as you're doing this, yeah, you could build that up, but it's like, a lot of people want to know that. It's like, so I'm because I one of the things I teach is how to okay, so from that, how you can, you could predict relatively accurate what your ROI should be on any given campaign from the partners that you have on board with some key metrics, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of those might be list size. But again, going into it, is you might not know the list size, the number of email subscribers they have. And so you can get that over time. And so some of these numbers we're plugging in after the fact, and then we can map things out. But that's kind of the approach you have to take. You have to be willing to say, no, this is still worth my time and effort, regardless, again, of the financial gain. I can't affect the return, but I can affect this first piece of it here, and know that it's worth my time to do. Because that person could also refer other people. I love that. I love turning my referral partners into more referral partners, my affiliates into more affiliates, partners into more partners. It's wild. So it's like every partner that you treat well should turn into maybe 3 more partners. So then it's just this thing that compounds over time. So one of the businesses I have right now, this is our 100% traffic is from partners, affiliates, 100%. And it's wild. And that took nothing to start up in terms of ad spend or anything like that. But it was tapping into relationships, but also just using the same techniques here to get people in certain spaces to partner up and promote. And so we're only done that for over 6 months, but we've done a solid chunk of change, and it works. It's because it's a really still untapped market. People aren't willing to put in the time and effort, I think.
Awesome, Tom. So where can we find more information? Like, where can we connect with you?
Joel, I'm just going to send them your way, man. Let's send them to the show notes. Everybody should go check that out. You'll link it up. We'll be good to go.
Sounds good, Tom. Dude, this has been a fascinating conversation. We talked about so much with, collaboration and joint ventures and partnerships and the big umbrella and how to establish those relationships and referrals turning into more referrals, affiliates turning into more affiliates, which that wasn't like, we just very, very briefly touched on that. But I think that is a huge, huge, huge leverage point, which is, again, why you treat every partner, every referral with the same amount of respect, because you never know who they're connected to. And that turns into, that person with a 100-person list turns into a referral to somebody who's got a 10,000 person list and a 20,000 person list. So Tom, I've learned a ton today. I appreciate everyone for listening in today. I can't even send them your way. Go check out the show notes, connect with Tom. I'll have his links down in there, and let him know that you heard him on the show Experts Unleashed, heard him on our show. Tom, thanks again for everything, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Experts Unleashed. If you're looking for new and innovative ways to design and execute your plan to become a 6 or 7-figure expert without the massive team, apply now at theperfectexpert.com.